BSides DC 2017 videos are brought to you by Threat Quotient, introducing the industry's first threat intelligence platform designed to enable threat operations and management, and Data Tribe, a new kind of startup studio co-building the next generation of commercial cybersecurity, analytics, and big data product companies.
Hello everybody, my name is Michael Bailey and this is Stealing Our Children's Youth. So, who am I? I am a student at George Mason University. I'm also an intern at the Crypsis Group, kind folk up here. I've been there for probably coming on to 2 years. President of Mason's CTF Club, that's them. And in high school I did a bunch of competition stuff. That's just like where my background is with this. I'm also 20, so if you're inviting me to your work happy hours, I can't go for a reason. So, yeah. Or I can, but that's a separate conversation. Disclaimer, nobody told me to do this. Nobody told me I could or couldn't do this. Nobody even knew what I was doing. Literally, Jericho at Attrition, if you've ever heard of him, he proofread it, but other than that, nobody knew I was submitting. So don't assume when I talk about these companies and these programs and all kinds of stuff, I'm representing any of them. This is just personal experience for the most part. Okay, so what's all this about? Cybersecurity activities, programs, competitions that are primarily in college and high school. How you would theoretically be able to help them if you're out of that age / not necessarily age institution. And obviously, as a lot of people are aware, some people might have, but a lot of people didn't get to this point learning through a public school classroom. So there's a lot of interest in trying to get knowledge outside of the usual routines. So a few just precursor notes. There's a lot of different cybersecurity competitions. Attack defense is more free range, and you see them less common because they're kind of hard to set up, but we can talk about that more later. Maryland is absolutely like killing it right now, at least in college. Yeah, that's CJ with UMBC, and they're doing really well. I'm as somebody who's competing in Virginia, and like, not that I'm getting first or anything, but at a relatively high level, like half of Maryland could like wipe the floor with me. So just figured I'd preface that. High school is a little bit more restrictive in the programs they can run because they're A, minors, like heavily, and B, high schools have closed networks and it's all really controlled for related reasons because they're minors. So if they're trying to do a cybersecurity competition, it's kind of less logistically possible. Who cares about what I'm talking about here? If you're an HR person trying to hire out of college / high school, this is a great idea of what programs would be a good idea to target in terms of who's actually, I don't want to say good, but who's engaged in their field right now. People who are just opportunistic or curious. For nice people, maybe you want to volunteer at these programs and help out the next generation of people who are doing cybersecurity. Young people who are actually trying to participate, and parents who have spawn coming through these programs. Crypt Kids is here this year, so we have a lot of procreation fans here. So that might be a little more applicable. So background in general on what different cybersecurity kind of competitions there are out there. There's a CTF, it's a capture the flag. A lot of people who are here have probably heard of them, considering there's literally like 2 or 3 running at this event. There's Jeopardy, which is kind of question and answer. It's more fun than an exam, I promise. Attack defense, you try to hack people without getting yourself hacked. And then there's also a less common one, computer network defense, which is all of the fun of defending with none of the fun of attacking. But you could argue that CNDs are more real world applicable because it's not like you're hacking back 24/7 unless you're a very specific set of companies. And then in CNDs, there's generally you get graded on service uptime, just to be more realistic if you're protecting a box. But yeah, some of you might already know what that is. Also, I should preface with a lot of this talk isn't necessarily very technical. So if there are people who are trying to get their technical fix / don't know what a CTF even looks like, I'm hosting a incredibly small one, like 4 problems, and they're all recycled from past CTFs at bsides.michaelbailey.co. So if they're really trying to get their fix, they can go to that. But also just to see what the interface is like. The interface that's being used there, fun fact, is literally the same interface the IoT Village is using right now. It's called CTFD. So if you've seen that, you've seen what's up there pretty much. So what probably makes a good competition program exercise kind of thing? This is largely personal opinion, but if it's both beginner friendly and that people can at least get their foot in the door if they don't know that much and not like instantly get crushed, then it's kind of a nice program or competition to have. Requires you talk to other humans is pretty good. At CTFs, there's a lot to be seen about this, and while it's great and you can assess people's technical ability to a degree through a CTF, you don't necessarily assess any of their soft skills in the slightest. I verified that with, I had a conversation with Shane Wilton, who competes on Samurai, about that. Samurai's like really high ranking. And there was apparently somebody on CTF time who was like top 3 and literally was running individual. So you don't necessarily have to be a good people person to ace some competitions. Also isn't a complete waste of time and stays on topic. So some competitions don't actually, that are cybersecurity competitions, really drill in on, as a lot of people know, there's fundamentals that go into cybersecurity, like IT, computer science, like there's a lot of components to it. Sometimes competitions like won't even try to specifically hit cybersecurity. It'll be more of an IT security competition or more of a computer science competition or something like that, which is fine. It's just important to note when you're looking at a competition, whether you're hiring a participant or you're trying to volunteer at that competition or you're anything like that, it's probably focused in a specific area. Attack defense are kind of nice because it's more creative, so you can do more different areas. But one example is Cyber Patriot is a very common high school one. Cyber Patriot is great. Cyber Patriot is largely IT. You could have no computer science background and get first place at Cyber Patriot. Great, again, great foundation, great program. It's important to note it's pretty much IT. Frequent struggles, a lot of rules and stipulations. There are a couple that are very anal about their rules. Disclosure of bias. I got a rule book thrown at me in Cyber Patriot. But I should still maintain that, for instance, Cyber Patriot is run by largely ex-military. So they're very like, here's our 60-page book, and you should know every line in that book. So, again, teamwork is pretty important because you want to build your soft skills as much as you want to build your technical proficiency. And like I said, it pretty much only teaches a subset of information 99% of the time. So we're going to go into examples of these competitions I've been talking about. High school, Cyber Patriot is an incredibly common one. It's IT security, but it's, so Cyber Patriot, you get a VMware image, you have to lock it down and harden it as much as possible. They have 10 pain points in mind, whether that's policy or an intentionally messed up firewall rule or something like that, and they grade you based on how many of those pain points you actually covered. Cyber Maryland is a conference. In Cyber Maryland, there is an MDC3 competition. I think they're renaming it to like Maryland Cyber Challenge because they rebranded and redid everything this year. And then also there's a Virginia Cyber Range if you're in Virginia, which is still in beta and still building, but it's got some exciting stuff going for it. In college, there's CCDC, which is basically a college Cyber Patriot, and they do some stuff better, such as instead of doing those 10 pain points, which is great, but if you're securing a firewall and all that, and you don't actually get any points for that. That's kind of a shame because that's the kind of thing you would do in the real world. But if in Cyber Patriot they're only checking those 10 points or those 10 bullets, none of it, Siri just turned on and I have no idea how. Those 10 bullets, then like it's very static in the way it's done and doesn't necessarily grade the person to how they're actually doing in the terms of hardening the box. CCDC does more of the stuff I was talking about where they enforce that you actually have your services up and check on all that, and in later rounds they have an active red team attacking you and all that. It's more, in my opinion, like professional applicable. They're both great programs though. CCDC, all this we'll talk about. Cyber Olympics, in the past it's been great. It's been kind of a Jeopardy CTF kind of thing. But one big note about Cyber Olympics, usually they have tiers where it's like round 1, we're going to cut out 30%. Round 2, we're going to cut out 50%. Cyber Olympics is round 1, everybody competes. Round 2, like 30 teams compete. So they cut straight to finals. And in general, when you're a professional, you pretty much get your lion's share of competitions. You can do whatever you need to do. Companies even run internal ones. I know Capital One runs one every month, for instance. Amazon likes doing that kind of stuff. So you pretty much have your lion's share. Shout out to Pico CTF, which we're going to go over later, because they like gamifying their competition and they like making it actually fun. Not saying the other ones aren't fun, but they put a lot of effort into the graphics and the production value and the entertainment aspect of it. So in particular in high school, I should preface this with I went to two schools actually in Fairfax County. So that's where I'm largely talking out of, but these are in multiple counties in multiple states. I went method and went straight back to my high school and went to a meeting to see if anything's changed, and things have changed. They used to be a Cyber Patriot club, and now they're just a cybersecurity club in general. And they're working on something called the Virginia Cyber Range, which I'll talk a little bit about, but I recognize not everybody's here from Virginia. So MDC3 in particular, they had a high school league and a college professional league. Previously, it was attack, defense, live, buy-in at like $250 a team, and then the prize is like some, for our high school and college, sweet amount of money, like $2,000, $5,000. Personally, I have a rough history with this competition. I don't want to take the stage and bash companies, but I did write articles and write-ups on this competition on Medium, so if you're absolutely curious, those are the only 2 Medium articles I've ever written, so. After a year or 2 of going, okay, this is getting really bad, let's put it on ice, they stopped doing it for 2 years, and this year they came back with a new company, new format, new everything. It's only 1 hour now, but it's annual and it's at the Cyber Maryland Conference. And as they rebranded and redid their whole format, I can't speak that much on how it was this year, so I don't want to speak too much on it in general. Because it's not very beneficial to talk about how it was in the past if it's not there anymore. Virginia Cyber Range, it's coming out of Virginia Tech largely. It's really better for coursework than it is like extracurricular activities and all that. What it is it's designed to be a courseware program, and every time they do an exercise or a lesson or something, they get if you're familiar with SIFT, it's a virtual machine based on forensics largely, virtual machine in their browser, and they can do the actual courseware from their browser in a highly interactive fashion. It's just starting out. It's just now building. In high school, it's in a closed beta right now. I'm told it's a closed beta and I'm not invited, but I'm assuming it's a closed beta, considering I'm not in high school, so why would I be invited? And it's in a public beta for colleges. If you're faculty at a college, you can just ask for it and they give it to you. But yeah, this is really of more interest specifically for if you're somehow involved in curriculum in a high school or college. Yeah, their special sauce is like the fact that they're able to provision virtual machines directly into the browser and teach through them. They actually got mad at me because I got a copy, I got invited to the private beta, and then I immediately launched all 10 of their courses with 200 participants which means it instantly spun up 2,000 SIFT VMs. And apparently that's not something you're supposed to be doing in beta. So they were very polite. Cyber Patriot, I'm a huge fanboy of this program. And that should have extra oomph to it, to the fact that, as I said previously, they threw the rule book at me, and I'm still a huge fan of this program. Above is the team I had in high school and our mentor. Below is what a meeting looked like in our high school. Everything's great. Who says you can't get slides from your mother's Facebook? Nobody. So there you go. Yeah, other than the fact that CP is a really unfortunate acronym to be talking about when you're in high school, it's a great competition. They do computer network defense. It's largely Windows and Linux and all that. But it's like I said, it's a set number of like 10, 15 pain points and vulnerabilities. They give you a virtual machine, for instance. They say this is an SSH server. If it's running Apache, you shouldn't uninstall it because all they told you was it was an SSH server. So you're hardening, you're limiting the attack surface, you're doing all that, and they're scoring you based on that. Our club was relatively large based on the fact that we sourced out of the entire county. It had 105 people in my year, 16 teams. And a great part of this is if you're not in high school or college, they have a lot of avenues for people to help out. You can coach, you can mentor a Cyber Patriot team, you can do any of that. And it's multiple avenues of commitment. Coaches need to show up to competitions and all that. They have strict rules on what they need to be doing. Mentors are specifically, oh, you're from a technical background, become a mentor and help in whatever capacity you can, whether that's talking to students, literally however you can. There's no requirements for a mentor other than you're going through a background check. Which, if you can't pass a background check to show up to a high school, like that's not an incredibly high bar. You get actual connections in real life. Paul is here. Paul, I competed with in Cyber Patriot like 3 years ago, and we've been roommates for like 3 years. So you do actually meet people in these programs. Wave hi, Paul. That's Paul. Also, Chuck is here who did Cyber Patriot, and I don't know if I met you through Cyber Patriot, but okay, never mind, I lied. Anyway. They actually have good integrations in the industry, and a lot of companies are aware, at least in HR departments and all that, of what Cyber Patriot is. Like half of these people at the table, all of them were invited from our Cyber Patriot Club to an AFCEA conference. Half of them already had internships, keeping in mind this is junior and senior year of high school, so it was a great start. It's applicable. People hear the program and know what it actually is and recognize that there's value in people doing well in them. Certain companies pay more attention to it than others, like Northrop Grumman's like their platinum major super sponsor, so they keep a very close eye on it, but a variety of companies are aware of it and enjoy it. So yeah, restating, if you are a professional and you are interested in helping, I'm not saying the best avenue is to probably coach or mentor Cyber Patriot, because that would just be shilling Cyber Patriot, but probably the best avenue, in my opinion, is to coach or mentor Cyber Patriot. Okay, Pico CTF. It's an online competition. It's good times. If you are aware of what a CTF is, which you should be because I literally explained what a CTF is. It's a Jeopardy CTF, so it's answering question, you get artifacts, all that fun stuff. It's a phenomenal example of where corporate funding could help, because while I'm not cued into all the details and I'm not exactly on their planning committee, they had their 2014 competition and 2013 competition constantly running since it started. It was amazing, it was beginner friendly, and then they went, because of server costs, we're shutting them down. Now they're no longer available, we used them for training. So that's a good example of where a company could help, because I'm pretty sure that's like a blip on the radar of anybody's AWS bill. So, they're doing phenomenal work. It's high school friendly. But it's still got similarities to what you would see in a college or professional competition. It's been, in my opinion, not less beginner friendly, but it's been more competitive and harder in the past year or two. And their stories used to be like elaborate, like it was literally, I think the 2013 or 2014 one was like, my father's been kidnapped and I have to go like save him from a spider monster or something. Like it was an elaborate storyline for a competition. And now they're putting a little less effort into the stories, but like really who cares, because it's not like anybody in CTFs are even remotely trying to write stories on it in the first place. So they're still ahead in that regard. This is an example of what the 2017 version looked like. So you have a variety of categories, whether that's web, crypto, forensics. You have a shell to play around with. A lot of competitions are big fans of doing as much as they can in the browser, just for the sake of if you're a high school or college student, like you can't even guarantee you have a good computer for the competition. So they have the shell. Also, it's a known good environment. So if somebody's trying to do like a 64-bit binary on their laptop and their laptop's running 32-bit, you don't want that to be the mitigating factor of them not being able to do a cybersecurity competition. So at least here you have a known good environment. Yeah, and then there's a storyline between scenes, but again, like, yeah. There are other CTFs in high school that are pretty good. Two I enjoy are Easy CTF and High School CTF. Ironically, both harder than Pico CTF in my opinion. Easy CTF has been getting harder, ironically enough. And they're both pretty heavily in computer science, like I said. Usually they lean one way into another field instead of cybersecurity itself. A lot of CTFs scope creep into computer science pretty quickly. How can you help? Become a coach or an advisor or anything. Coach is the more hands-on, needy position. Feel free to host an event. Capital One literally had one in their security operations center with live security feeds going on and people still at work there for GMU. So if they can do that in their security operations center with sensitive data running down the screens, you really have no excuse as to why you can't host one. And reach out to any county or school. At this point, it's like every county that's trying to participate in these kinds of programs. It's likely going to be a two-sided relationship. You can probably hire out of there, and they can. When I say can likely fund school, I mean you can likely fund the program, such as a lot of them have entry fees, and while a lot of counties, $250 to send a team is peanuts. For a lot of counties, it's not. The fee itself, depending on the competition, is not a concern. Cyber Patriot has a $200 or $300 entry fee for team, which adds up quickly. But if you are in a certain position, Cyber Patriot is very willing to help you. I don't know how institutions work, but there are classifiers for lower, less well-funded institutions, and they look for those, and if you match one of them, they go, okay, we'll just let you in. So some of them do accommodate for that, some of them don't. For instance, MDC3, nothing against them. They're not large enough where they're planning on doing all of those like fee structuring things. So theirs is just $250 straight up. So that's somewhere where they legitimately might not get funding for that. So I know, I can speak from personal experience regarding the Cyber Patriot structure because there was a school, I talk to coaches a lot, there was a school in Fairfax County actually. They start with an F, I'm not trying to censor them, it's legitimately I just don't remember the name of the school. But they were in the lower income area and they were able to just get their fee waived. So, college. Like I said last time, how I was basing my experience in high school on basing my high school experience in my Marshall High School experience. College, I'm at George Mason University. I'm a junior, so that's my background there. That's what I'm largely speaking out of, but also I did ask people before this presentation what kind of competitions they did. CCDC is a common one. Like I said, it's college Cyber Patriot really. It's really fun. Again, it's extremely limited in the fact that it's pretty much IT. Good times, still limited. They go virtual round, then once you do well enough in the virtual round, you have a regional round. CJs, where are regionals for this region? Laurel? Yeah. Okay, they're in Laurel in this region. And then nationals, San Antonio last time, right? San Antonio was the last place they put nationals. So yeah, they use live red teaming after, I think, regionals and nationals they do. Virtuals they might. I don't know, honestly, because they hook you up to a network, but there's a red team in virtuals? Okay, there is a red team in virtuals. There definitely is, because when I did CCDC, I had to leave 2 hours early, but I had a hardened firewall and nobody else did, so I still ended with the highest score because everybody else got wrecked after I left. Or they wrecked their own computer. Entirely possible. Professional CTFs, if you're in college, you should be starting to enter that world anyway. So a lot of the professional competitions, just see if you can go. And if you can go, then go. Like Net Wars here is like, it's a professional conference and all that, but nothing's stopping a college student from registering and doing a Net Wars here. So I encourage, if you can go, then go. If you're overwhelmed, try again, do another thing. Study what happened when you got overwhelmed. That's a common thing I see with like people who are beginning, is they'll go to a competition. It'll be some competition that's designed for like Carnegie Mellon's team and like MIT's team to go at each other's heads. And they'll do it and they'll pick the highest value problem and be like, wow, this is overwhelming, this is a lot, not cut out for this, quit everything. And it's like, no, it's not meant to be the easiest thing to understand always. And if you don't understand it, A, you could pick another problem, pick another competition. B, you could study how it's done. Also of note, in almost all of these competitions, they publish write-ups after the competitions. Those are not a bad way to learn, especially if you attempted the problems. NCL is a pretty, National Cyber League is a pretty good one. They teach and test not at the same time as much as you would think, in the sense that you can get the curriculum and not even be a team in NCL. And a lot of people in the competition don't necessarily use the curriculum, they just wing it. But they use something called Cyber Skyline, and a lot of people are starting to use it. It's a local company, and it's kind of an attempt at like an OS in the browser kind of thing, if that makes any sense to people. Like, this screenshot below is a browser, and it's running HTML5, JavaScript, all that. But they're attempting to at least make it possible so you can do the competition just in the browser. So dramatically limiting it to, do you have a at least Lenovo like $200 laptop, to do you have a modern browser? That's great if you're in high school and college and you don't necessarily have access to the resources you otherwise would. And again, place a company would be able to help, is actually get them those resources. And also Cyber Skyline is pretty unique to the region because I believe it is a local company, so if you're going to California, I wouldn't necessarily expect to see Cyber Skyline yet. There are a wide variety of local events. Metropolis is one in, why did I just say in? Because I don't remember where it is. But that's okay. Metropolis is one, it's local. MDC3, already mentioned. Virginia Tech does a competition every year for colleges largely. That's great because I'd imagine if you're in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, that's your best bet. You could do Cyber Patriot, they could have programs there, but a lot of them are Maryland and Northern Virginia competitions. It's also a great competition. They do a hybrid kind of between Jeopardy and like actual servers and all that, in the sense you have to pivot, you have to actually scan these servers, you have to get into them, and then the challenge is sitting on the actual server. There's a wide variety of local private events, so one of the best things you can do if you're a company is reach out to schools and be like Capital One did last week, where they reached out to George Mason and goes, yeah, we can have a little local competition for George Mason at least. Like we can scale that. And then George Mason came and asked their students if they wanted to come. We heard it, sent like 35 people, and then yeah, we have people who are engaged who are doing competitions. So that's something where I would recommend if you're a high school or a college student, reaching out to your institution and seeing what they have available and keeping up on the mailing lists and all that for that kind of stuff. If you're a company, keep in mind that just because you want to do a competition doesn't mean you have to do a competition for 1 million people, because I recognize that's not possible for a lot of companies. Code Day is a local hackathon type thing, and it happened in a local, when I did it, it happened in like a local graphic design studio that could not plausibly hold more than 100 people. It was basically a townhouse in DC. So Like, there is a possibility to do it regardless of what space you have usually. There's even like cleared spaces do it, they just make preparations. Obviously, you can't just let high schoolers in. The winner in the past 2 years of Net Wars, I believe. I could be wrong, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Did you win the past 2 years?
No.
Did you win last year? 2 years ago. 2 years ago. So I got confused because I didn't go last year to this, but I went the year before. Well, two years ago, CJ won it at Net Wars. CJ is a year older than me at UMBC, so college students can absolutely be competitive in this kind of stuff, even if it's a professional competition. That's my main point there. IoT Village is doing a mini CTF type thing, but you have to wire in, and it's been busy. But still, it's a great competition. They do it, I believe, every year usually. So those are examples of like local events you need to keep your eye out for and try to show up to if you can. Anyway, and there's a lot of research involved in trying to figure out where competitions are and which ones you actually like. Because if somebody posts on Meetup that they have a competition, that implies you're watching Meetup for competitions. So you need to like keep plugged into as many feeds as you can if you're trying to go to these local events and you're trying to understand where they are. Some of them announce with 6 months lead time, some of them announce with a week lead time. So it's pretty tricky. You need to pay attention to the actual feeds they're announcing through. Which Meetup, mailing lists, news bulletins, so Google's pretty accurate, all that kind of stuff. If you're trying to be helpful to the real world, you host local events. Make them at least accessible to growing individuals. So one example of this is, like I hit on in my earlier thing, hosting them at a bar might not be the best idea because 80% of the people who want to go won't physically be able to go. But in addition, making them accessible to growing individuals, keeping them local, because some people might not be able to drive. So I understand you may want to appeal to a larger audience, but if there's a certain core group you're going after, keeping it local to that group is probably a good idea. I drove to the Virginia Tech Summit. That was a 4.5-hour drive. I don't expect most college students to be able to do a 4.5-hour drive during midterms. Like, you keep in mind what college students and high school students are doing. It's also an insanely unique opportunity. Like I said, there were people working while I was doing the Capital One competition in their SOC. So I was sitting at a desk doing like base64 decoding, G-zipping data, un-G-zipping data, all kinds of fun stuff in Linux. And there's a analyst sitting right next to me who's like, oh, cool, you're able to do this stuff. And while I'm very happy at my company, if I wasn't, that would take 3 seconds to turn around and go, oh, you have a card? Okay, cool. You guys have internships? What kind of stuff do you have going on? And I saw other people who were able to do that at that event. So it's a great opportunity to mesh together. Full disclosure, I did not expect to get through this quickly, so I'm going to go back to a couple slides that I thought are important. Cyber Patriot. A key bit here is Northrop Grumman, for instance. Northrop Grumman has a pipeline specifically for Cyber Patriot competitors. There is an internship that is, we are looking for Cyber Patriot high school students. And if you are a Cyber Patriot high school student, you can apply to that internship. That kind of gives you a fast lane to an internship. Not all competitions do this, obviously. Pico wouldn't necessarily be able to do this since they have 1 million registrants and they're online. But I will say, even with Pico, for years they were sponsored by the NSA, and the NSA, I'm pretty sure, reached out to some higher ranking Pico people, as you would expect them to. Yes, so this went, I apologize, this went slightly briefer than I expected. Does anybody have any questions? And I highly encourage people to ask questions because I'm under time. What's up?
So, for high school students who are starting out, starting to look at CTFs in general, what was a couple of things that you would suggest?
So the question was regarding a high school student who's just starting out. What are some things you could suggest? It's all down to, I gotta say, there is an element of barrier to entry in what's already established. Cyber Patriot, you could in theory just start a team, but like that's a lot of theory. So if you have a team at your school, you could do it. If you don't, Pico CTF, literally no barrier to entry, recommend doing it. CTFs in general, generally online, generally no barrier to entry. Find like-minded people in your school who can, there's power in numbers in this kind of stuff to a large degree. We started a cybersecurity club at our high school and suddenly 100 people showed up after we promoted it, and the school got hip to it and started distributing stuff about it. So there's power in numbers. Wish it wasn't the case, but there's power in it already being sitting there for you. Some counties are already hip to that. Fairfax County, almost every school has a Cyber Patriot program set up already. Even in middle schools, Frost Middle School, Kilmer Middle School have Cyber Patriot teams. So CTFs, if there's no barrier to entry, Cyber Patriot, if possible. If there's any existing things in the county or the school, great, but if there's not, at least CTFs. No problem. Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, Pico CTF entirely online, no teams. It's similar to other CTFs in the sense that most CTFs do have teams. It is online. If you went solo, you could go solo. You could have a team of one. And if you had people around you who were interested in it, again, there are power numbers. You could register a team for that. There's another popular CTF called Seesaw, Cybersecurity Awareness Week. NYU runs it. They have an unlimited team cap, and the only time it becomes an issue is when you get to finals, and then they say, okay, send 5 people because we're not flying out 1 million people. So there are, in all these competitions, there's pretty much power numbers. It's not mandatory that they all be physically together in 99% of cases. Cyber Patriot has rules about who's in the same place at the same time. But most CTFs, you could be remote and in a chat room and you could be doing it. Any other questions? Yes? Yeah, so this is a key distinction I didn't make well. Cyber Patriot was kind of thrown in along with a lot of CTFs. Cyber Patriot runs very different from CTFs. Cyber Patriot gives you a virtual, this is going to get a little technical, Cyber Patriot gives you a virtual machine. That virtual machine has a scorer on it. The scorer scores the configurations you make on the machine and whether or not they're expected configurations to take your system from a vulnerable to less vulnerable state. Entirely different than 99% of CTFs that are set up. Attack defense CTFs, you would probably go through the same motions because you're trying not to get attacked. And most people have the same list regardless of whether or not they're looking for specific things or whether or not they're just trying to generally make the system more secure. So I can see there being a lot of overlap if you're defending in an attack defense competition. But Cyber Patriots, like I said with the CNDs, it's more like a computer network defense competition. Yes?
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I'm curious what happens outside the United States in terms of these competitions, say in Latin America or Asia.
The question was outside of the United States, what kind of happens with this kind of stuff? I know, obviously very limited about that, but Cyber Patriot runs Cyber Centurion, exact same branding, exact same design in the UK. I've seen a lot of attack defense CTFs in India, in that region in general. Well, I can't speak about South America specifically because I don't know what's off the top of my head what would be there, but I'm sure there's local at least events regarding CTFs.
So some of these teams could engage people from other countries in this virtual.
Absolutely. There is a team. Please, nobody quote me about this, but I believe there's a team called HitCon who is based out of Taiwan. Wow, that's, whoops. based out of Taiwan. And there's teams from a variety of countries. There's CNU competing against a team in Japan. It's largely international, and on top of that, for instance, our club had a speaker last week who was like, yeah, we used to compete out of South Carolina out of our university, but now we all got jobs and we're in like 2 or 3 different countries, and now we're all communicating in chat and doing the competitions there. So remote is absolutely a possibility. CTFtime.org has a lot of the resources regarding CTFs, and you'll see the moment you see there, like they aggregate a scoreboard on like the general landscape of where all these CTFs are and stuff. The scoreboard's like 5 different countries at least. So, yes.
Are there any word games or resources that you found really helpful to get started?
Resources to get started. I will preface this with, I'm always a fan of like diving in and just learning through a fire hose of information. So if you jump into a competition and you don't get it, it's not the end of the world, but fiddling with live problems are a great way to learn. That being said, there are a variety of resources. Everybody has their own list. It depends on the category you're going after, because CTFs teach you web, they do reverse engineering, they do cryptography. Cyber Patriot has their own line of stuff. If you literally go to their website, they have training resources. Some are better than others, but groups have Cyber Patriot resources out there. CTFs, though, everybody has their own list, and it depends on what category you want to get into. There's reverse engineering, like I said, forensics, web, cryptography. Depends on the competition. I would recommend like Googling like a hot list of CTF resources, and you'll at least see people's personal ones. I don't want to start throwing out and spouting URLs because nobody's going to be like rapidly writing like 50 different URLs down. One thing I can do is I mentioned earlier michaelbailey.co. I can oh my god, I don't know why I did that. I can throw what on earth? I can throw my list up there. I don't know why that closed, but whatever. I'll do one more question because I don't want Q&A to be too long. Anything? Okay. Okay. What's up? Okay. I just got trolled by a coworker. So. All right. Cool. Thank you.